It starts in the quiet, a noise sheathed in shush. The crucible's shard of glass strikes a talking drum, stirring the Owo head from Igbo Laja, who, with mosquito mischief, winks across the aisle to the torso of a king, the Oni of Ife. He allows the merest, most flicker of smiles, grips his horn of medicine, and strikes the glass thrice. What ripples out is majesty of the purest kind. A wave of stubborn magic echoes from his hold, and all the forms of Ife here awaken and groan. Along the aisle, the mudfish that hibernate at home startles to find the hunter god carved in granite stone, eyes stern as arrows, minded to find their home. The palm wine vessel tips its little liquor for its broken brothers and the gagged heads. Their muffled groans gather around the horns of goats, the terracotta cattle, the coy canine. All sprout spine and vertebra and limb. The owl wing beats, the monkey sings. But all their charge against the glass remains a futile thing, till Oduduwa's chameleon descends to test the land. So these of Ife alight on safe ground.
Godfrey, Ife, can you tell us the importance of Ife, the significance of Ife?
Ife is one of the first 5 holy cities created by God in the world, right? And is the first holy city in Africa, in Nigeria. So that tells you it's very, very powerful. It is the center of the world, and it is the ancestral origin of the Yoruba people.
So it's the land of the gods.
It's the land of the gods, and according to Ife mythology, it's related to the Garden of Eden in the Bible. If you remember, if you read your Bible in Genesis, where I come from is about 15-20 minutes drive to Ife. It's on the eastern part of Ife, so we are one. That is my root. Ife is very important to any Yoruba man because it's the center of creation. It's where all other Yoruba people, get their, culture.
If you look at the collection here, at the artifacts, they are mostly heads. What is the fascination with the heads?
That's a good question. In the Yoruba kingdom, we believe the head is where authority comes from. So let me put it that way: the leader is the center of power, and we believe authority is in the head and it's in the mouth.
Ife was preoccupied with religion, with ritual, and most of this represented the Ife cosmology of the head as the center of power. And the head defined you. You didn't define, the body did not define the head. The head is an entity unto itself. The fact that we're seeing so many heads here is something to do with that religious belief within the Ife setting at the time. You being a Yoruba, and I presume you're Christian.
Yes, I am Christian.
Do you still believe in the other traditional?
He who does not learn from this, it's not only ego is an omugo. Omugo is somebody who makes foolishness his constant drink. That's the root. If I am a Christian, yes, and if I'm asked to become a king now, for example, I can't say no. Right? Where I come from, my mother is a direct descendant of the kings, meaning that any time I could be called upon to become a king, or my children, any of my sons, right? I will not, because I'm a Christian, say no. So I have to follow the rules. If I don't, a lot of bad things might happen because we are so superstition, in Nigeria. So that if you're asked to do something and you don't do it, any evil can befall such person. So that I'm a Christian will not really count in this matter.
How significant is this exhibition to your children?
They can't wait to see it. Not only to my children, to anybody who is Yoruba. So it's not only important to me, even people who are older than me will be willing to come and visit and see, for themselves what they can't see back home.
Having this exhibition here is in a way getting to know Africa, especially for people who are here in the diaspora. It is a window into a very sophisticated continent that we're yet to discover. Just like all these faces which have no names, there are many aspects of Africa that have not been named. And I think this is one way of baptizing it and knowing Africa.
The reason that people should come and see this show is that it represents an African civilization at the height of its powers between the 11th and the 15th century, of which almost nothing was known about to the world beyond until the discovery of the works of art. A good deal of IFE art has been found by accident. In the dry season of 38-39, they were digging out the foundations for a house in the area behind the king's palace, and they found 17 cast brass heads and a half figure. And at that point, the king of IFE himself said, "Well, I've got 2 of these in my palace." And he produced a terracotta, the Lajua head, which is in the show, and the mask of Obaluvon, an early king of IFE, and the person who is credited with introducing brass casting to IFE.
This is a very fine bronze head, very similar to those that are on display in the exhibition of the IFE heads. This is made by a process known as hollow lost wax casting. In that, the first stage is to make a core of clay that will occupy the space inside. When that has been done and moulded, what one does then is coat it with wax. So put on wax to the thickness that you require. Then what the next stage is to actually do the important bit, the artwork. In other words, to carve the wax to the face. So in other words, you'll wind up with a wax looking exactly like this, with the clay core, solid clay core inside.
There are 2 kinds of holes. There are quite big holes in the neck, and they may have been for fitting the heads onto some kind of wooden body, which might be dressed. You then get smaller holes around the hairline, and almost certainly that's for the addition of a beard made out of small glass beads. And then you get holes around the top of the head, and that's fairly obviously for the attachment of some kind of crown. The heads must have been representing some kind of chiefly or royal person. Some of the heads, both in cast brass and in terracotta, have very close parallel marks down the faces, across the eyelids and even on the lip and so forth. And they could be some form of scarification, possibly indicating status, ritual status, political status. It could be to create a different kind of visual effect, or it could be because of some reason of which we know nothing.
At this stage, you then add pouring channels down which the metal will flow, and you have some other channels, once again in wax. The next stage then is to actually apply the very fine clay very carefully to the outside, to the thing, to create a negative mould.
One of the qualities that people often mention is that serenity, that sense of repose. And one of the things that we know from modern Yoruba culture is that the ideal way for a man or a woman of importance to present themselves is calm and dignified with your mouth shut.
The next stage then is to invert it and put it in the furnace so that the wax can run out. So you've now got a hollow space where the wax was. You then put that at a higher temperature and run in the molten brass and let the whole thing cool down, take away the mold casing, and there is your head.
The overwhelming visual quality of those heads is their naturalism, an idealized naturalism. In other words, IFE has made us expand our view of what is truly African.
The IFE exhibition
Africa, 900 years ago. A great power, a cultured people. In the kingdom of Ife, now in Nigeria, a rich tradition of sculpture flourished, unlike anything in Africa or Europe at the time. These are works of technical sophistication, magnificent craftsmanship, and astonishing natural beauty.
which is a loan exhibition from Nigeria, from the National Commission for Museums and Monuments. Almost everything comes from Nigeria. It's the most extraordinary loan exhibition because they've lent almost everything from this wonderful find from 1938 of 17 brass copper alloy heads excavated at the compound of Onminji at Ife.
I have to apologize for my throat, but if you can listen to a whisper, I will do it. I would like to see, Jonathan, the iconic piece that's here. That's kind of the game-changing piece.
The game-changing piece. Well, one of the great things is this coronation figure, which was excavated in 1957, just outside Ife, and was one of a number of figures found at that time. What's important about these ones is they're full standing figures. They show the Oni, or the king of Ife, at the moment of coronation. So he's wearing a crown, he's holding a horn with medicine in his hand, and he has a staff in the other hand, and he has this regalia of red parrot feathers on his chest.
Why are these images so important?
They're so important because they're equivalent to the medieval sculptures in cathedrals today. So if you look for the image of Henry VII or of Richard II, these are the same date, and yet they have much more detail, they have much more humanity, and they have much more individuality than the sculptures being done in Gothic and early modern Britain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have more life.
This object over here was the first object from Ife to enter a museum collection. It came to the British Museum. It's one of two objects from the British Museum in the exhibition, and it came here in 1896, and it is a quartz or quartzite stool or throne, and it shows an enormous elephant trunk, and on it would have sat the Oni, or the king of Ife, with his legs astride the elephant trunk and his feet on a stool, because of course if he was king he mustn't touch the ground. Ife antiquities first really came to light in 1910. What happened was that a German adventurer and anthropologist called Leo Frobenius had heard about the mythic kingdom of Ife, and he decided in 1908 to go there. He went there in 1910. He took a man called Martius with him. They spent 3 weeks there. They got a team of Africans. They burrowed into the sacred grove underneath the ground. They found terracottas. For the first time you have here a cast of a terracotta head found in 1910, the original in Berlin, back together with the original headdress, which is still in Nigeria. Now, what Frobenius did was he met the keeper of this head. It's called the Olukan head. It represents the king of the sea. It was so beautiful and so wonderful that Frobenius didn't think it could have been made by an African. He thought it was of Greek or ancient European origin. He identified it with Poseidon, with the god of the sea. He identified the kingdom of Ife with the lost kingdom of Atlantis. And he wrote all of this up, and indeed it was published in the Illustrated London News over there in 1910. What happened in order to disprove all of this was over there where those people are two small brasses excavated in 1939 by Thurston Shaw, Igbo Ukwe brasses. One is of an elephant head, and those are about 1,000 years old. And they proved that this was an autonomous African tradition.
For me, it's always very difficult to speak about them because they are at once, as Jonathan said. I don't want to use the word proof because they have nothing to prove, but that they are arguably some of the highest human expression in these forms that they're made in. That if you want to think of it in a kind of pedantic way, at the time, many of these sculptures were being made. Go to our cathedrals and look at early medieval art. See how two-dimensional it was. See how stilted it was. And then look at this. So you can see that the advance of human beings on the African continent at that time was massive. And that makes me sad in a way when you think of the catastrophe of slavery, because it intruded. So we don't even know what could have been going further if that catastrophe hadn't happened. But it's a great sort of joy to see this work because it reinforces not only this continuity among people of African descent, and as one of the curators said, there's no such thing as African art. There's art made by African people, and here it is.
That is, marks that are cut into the skin, sometimes as part of an initiation ceremony. Chief Emeka Anyoku.
These facial markings, depending on how elaborate they are, would represent either members of the priesthood or the royalty, which implies bravery and strength, because the royals were expected to be strong people who led their people in war. In some cases also, it's a matter of identification, identifying the social class to which the particular facial marks belonged. But in my part of the country, it had facial marks like this until as recently as 50 years ago. As a small boy, I knew people who had their faces like that.